Hello, everyone. Before we go into why nitric oxide is a valuable molecule to pay attention to every day in your life, not just during coronavirus crisis, I want to make sure I introduce Dietrich Snyder, who is a registered dietitian with a Master of Public Health from the University of Michigan. And Dietrich, after working in various research settings at the University of Michigan Schools of Medicine and the Public Health, he also is now an adjunct professor at the Johnson and Wales Department of Health and Wellness and the Department of Culinary Nutrition. And I also want to make sure that I disclose that Dietrich is engaged with Resync as a content manager and a research and development. So that's very valuable for you to know. There is no skewed information that we're going to provide you with. Everything is based on evidence and recent science. And I want to make sure that you understand this video is for general population to understand how exactly nitric oxide can be valuable molecule to pay attention to during the coronavirus challenging time that we are going through. So without saying anything else, Dietrich, I would like you to take it over and tell our listeners why really nitric oxide is the essential molecule, just like oxygen, and why it's critical to pay attention to foods that can really increase nitric oxide in our body, and we will get into that. But first, let's just briefly, in a few sentences, say what really nitric oxide is and why everyone should be aware of it if they are not until today.
Wonderful, of course. Thank you for the introduction, Barbara. I also want to point out that, research on this is coming out by the hour. And so everything we've put together, we've done our best to pull the most recent and the best evidence available. But as we speak, new information is coming out. So just always take it with a grain of salt, and we'll always be updating you with the most up-to-date research. But this is our best understanding as we know it for now. So to start off, what is nitric oxide? It's a short-lived molecule. It was discovered in the 90s, and then it quickly became really apparent that nitric oxide has a critical role in health and disease for every bodily system. But the most important one to pay attention to, or at least the one that most people talk about, is how nitric oxide is used by your blood veins to relax. And when your blood veins relax, blood flows more readily and your blood pressure is able to lower. It's critical for life at every level, in every tissue, but making sure that you have healthy levels is one of the components of making sure that you're able to live the life that you want and to thrive in the way that you want to present yourself in this world. So that's what nitric oxide is. Now, what does it do? We mentioned the cardiovascular, the heart health benefits, but it also plays a role in other parts of your endothelium. That's just a term that refers to your blood veins and your lymphatic system. And if you're not totally sure what the lymphatic system is, it helps your white blood cells manage infections, and it helps distribute nutrients throughout your body. And so nitric oxide, not only is it good for improving blood flow, but it's important for improving lymphatic flow. Like we said, nitric oxide helps lower blood pressure, and that can help oxygenate tissues, which is really important when we're talking about some of the nasty side effects of COVID-19, where the advanced stage of this illness can lead to pneumonia, and that pneumonia decreases the amount of oxygen that you're able to take in and the amount of carbon dioxide that you're able to get out. And so nitric oxide is important there. It also plays a role in how your neurons are signaling each other, your nutrient balance in your bones and your blood and your muscles and everywhere else. And so I just cannot stress enough that it's being able to pay attention to healthy levels of nitric oxide are absolutely critical for being able to show up in this life how you want to be able to. Anything else you want me to hit on there, Barbara?
No, I think that, it's a very, very valuable way to put it together, because I think there is a misunderstanding by a lot of people that nitric oxide is either just for patients with cardiovascular pre-existing disease, not just even blood pressure, right? Coronary heart disease or so, but also people think that only nitric oxide is being taken by athletes to support their performance and at this point recovery, and that's clearly not, it's not the case. So I'm glad you covered, every single, I would say, most important information that we want people to know, that this is essential molecule for everyone, not just athletes, not just people with any pre-existing conditions, cardiovascular conditions.
Yeah, and we have a slide later on in this presentation to talk about every person who should be thinking about whether they should be supplementing with nitric oxide, and especially how that relates to people's risk for severe coronavirus.
Absolutely.
But we'll get to that. With research always developing, I'm always afraid of, making a presentation and then all of a sudden all of these resources are outdated already. But I have to say that if this is news to me, it's probably news to a lot of people. And when we don't have solid evidence and we don't have like the high grade clinical research out there to inform our decisions, then we just have to make our best guess. We have to use all of the research that we have available, and we have to roll with the punches and create a framework that we think is robust to the addition of new research.
Absolutely.
So, awesome. On that line, so I just want to preface this with, as of now, there is no current research on nitric oxide in the application of treatment for coronavirus 2019 symptoms. There are currently a couple of clinical trials for inhaled nitric oxide, but I have to say most of the information that we're pulling from either came from the Middle East respiratory syndrome epidemic, or the SARS coronavirus 1 epidemic of 2003, or things that we can extrapolate from the seasonal flu or other infections. So everything we're doing is just trying to create a framework that seems to be appropriate for addressing the situation, because that's what everybody here is doing. This is, the coronavirus pandemic is a big news to every health professional out there, and we're all just scrambling to try to figure out the best treatment options.
Absolutely, and I think it's very important, Dietrich, to just emphasize here that nobody has the cure. We are trying to collect data, what we know and what could, as we said, potentially work. And with that being said, we do know from the past in what capacity and in what form nitric oxide could be beneficial. And we're trying just to translate the data into today's situation with coronavirus and see how potentially someone can protect their immune system, support their immune system to really, if they find themselves with a mild, even symptoms, to really do what the body may require and really almost desire during this challenging time, right? To recover as soon as possible. Definitely.
And, on that point, almost all the research that we're looking at is with patients already in critical care. And the goal really is to prevent that from happening. There seems to be, the really severe outcomes, but then there's also moderate level outcomes from COVID 2019, and then there's mild outcomes, and some people are completely asymptomatic. So even the research around pharmaceuticals and clinical treatment options, those are generally for people of the highest risk for bad outcomes. And every person, regardless of regardless of what kind of professional they are, has to just use those data to inform less severe cases. And so we just make our best guess. And so I hope to be able to present the research faithfully and hopefully to the benefit of our readership and our customers. So Absolutely. We'll cover nitric oxide and its beneficial effect on lung function, nitric oxide and its well-established effect on heart function, nitric oxide and its immune response, and then Resync is a blended combination of evidence-based ingredients for optimizing inflammatory processes and recovery. And there's a lot of other ingredients that hold some promise for dealing with the symptoms of COVID-19. And so we'll talk about the effect of the other ingredients, or at least the potential effect that they may have. And we'll wrap it up with kind of looking at who's at highest risk for severe outcomes and how that overlaps with who is also at highest risk for decreased nitric oxide levels, who may want to consider supplementing more than other people.
Absolutely. Go ahead. Let's start with the nitric oxide and lung function, yeah?
Sounds great. All right. So as I said, we look at the second bullet point here, inhaled nitric oxide is suggested in clinical practice papers for severely critical condition COVID-19 patients. And it's even currently being tested in an FDA clinical trial to help the lung function of mechanically ventilated patients. And so we're obviously trying to prevent that from happening. And so I'll point out that many people with heart disease who are at highest risk for severe COVID-19 also don't make nitric oxide very well. And this is a very well-established pathway that can even be exacerbated by antihypertensive drugs. I'll point out that in previous decades, we've seen research that shows that this inhaled nitric oxide is helpful for critically ill patients with pneumonia, and it's even helpful for patients who had severe acute respiratory syndrome, or SARS, the epidemic that struck in 2003. And so, all this begs the question, does inhaled nitric oxide have the same bioactivity as ingested nitric oxide? And what do you do if you can't get inhaled nitric oxide? A lot of people are being, almost all people actually without severe symptoms right now, at least as of this recording, are just being sent home if they have mild conditions that can be managed by themselves. So how do you manage shortness of breath or mild pneumonia or some of these more mild symptoms of SARS at home? And I think the data suggests that nitric oxide boosting supplements can be a crucial component of just the improving lung function part of the treatment here.
And I will allow myself, Dietrich, very quickly to say it's always, let's treat the food as a medicine, and absolutely food comes first before supplementing. But we are in a crisis, and we are in a time when the specific food that does support nitric oxide production can or may not be obtained, even in the amounts, the qualities, the quantities that it's being really required to have any physiological changes. And we'll get into that a little bit later, but I want to make sure for anyone who's listening here, the step number one always is food your diet. And if you cannot support your body physiologically within the changes that are needed to support your nitric oxide production, then you may need to take a look into supplements. And of course, one supplement is not equal another, and we'll get into that a little bit later. So go ahead, Dietrich. I just thought that it's very important for people to say nutrition first before you reach for any supplement.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the most valuable takeaway. But you're also right. In settings of critical illness, you've got to take critical measures, and so the amount of nitrates you might find in your conventional beet in the fridge will depend on how long it's been in the fridge, where it came from, whether it's organic or not, all these other factors, whereas a concentrated, standardized, quality controlled supplement is able to provide exactly what you need when you need it. In the setting of mild pneumonia or some of these less severe symptoms of coronavirus.
And on that note, I will make sure that people understand red beet is a very valuable antiviral food. We know this, and it also has been tested exactly for nitric oxide, blood pressure, and other conditions. However, it's also a vegetable that is very inconsistent in nature, and we must remember that when we think that consuming 5 beets will give us exactly the same effect that, for example, a dose of a good standardized tested supplement could do. And because that's not the truth, right? That's why consistency with eating the right vegetables, the right fruits throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout the month is the right way to go, versus thinking that one dose of a red beet is going to do what a good supplement can do, because that's not the case.
Certainly, certainly. Well, I'm sure you and I could probably deliver a masterclass on this, but let's
Oh, yes.
stick with COVID-19 and
Absolutely.
nitric oxide. That's what our audience is here for. So we mentioned a little bit about the standardized content of nitrates delivered in Resync. And so I've included a little snippet of a much larger graph that we have that compares a bunch of different products. And it clearly shows that Resync recovery delivers the highest amount of nitrates in a single dose across the board. In addition to that, it's got 2 of the very highest quality certifications in supplements. And it's just so important with the amount of bunk supplements out there to seek the higher quality ones, the ones that are vetted by reputable third parties to contain what they actually say they contain and to give you the amounts that they actually say they do.
Yes, and on that note, Dietrich, I also want to make sure people understand that the entire table of comparison that Dietrich was just referring to, that Resync has the highest levels of nitrates per dose, that was tested independently by IUPUI in 2018. It's on our website, on resyncproducts.com, so you can absolutely see under the tab Why Resync what supplements were tested against ours. And also, please keep in mind that natural nitrates, and we'll get into that, it's a first step that you need to ingest orally if we don't have the inhaling, right? Nitric oxide, which doctors were giving in some of the studies that you mentioned previously, because it may be exactly more bioavailable. We don't know. I don't think that it was a test done oral versus inhaled, right? It would be fantastic to have it, but we unfortunately don't have it. So then you need to have the actually change taking place, and from nitrates you have to go into nitrites, and then you have to have a proper oral bacteria that we'll talk about in the next slides. That it depends person by person how even much nitric oxide you will create from the natural nitrates that you will orally consume. That's very important to note.
Yeah. And as we mentioned, the inhaled nitric oxide is not readily available to the common consumer. You'd be hard pressed to get it from your doctor in these times right now. They're pretty strapped for time and resources. And so our next best thing is a standardized quality controlled supplement that delivers high concentrations of this. And we do actually have decent evidence to show that oral nitric oxide boosters are able to be rapidly distributed through the blood. And when the blood exchanges the air in your lungs, there's a lot of surface area, and it does appear that nitrates are able to get to the lungs kind of from the back door, from the blood, rather than from what you inhale. So that's some pretty promising research in my mind.
Absolutely. And last point that I'm going to make is we did conduct a study with University of Memphis, and that study will be probably published after the coronavirus crisis will decrease or vanish completely, as it's in the publication process. But there was one edit that the professors had to make, so that may force them to go back to the testing, I would say, setting, and actually conduct one more setting before the study is being published. But we did do that on both of our product, Resync Recovery and Resync Collagen, and it exactly supported your thought that it showed in male and female that the nitrates levels increased dramatically in the blood plasma. And then, of course, study number 2 or 3 could be for us, where does it go? What does it do, right, physiologically? We are not there yet, but you've absolutely made a very valid point. It's important how the nitrates increase the blood plasma and where the nitrates go and what they do physiologically to a human body.
Yeah, absolutely. So looking forward to more research on this, but sticking with the topic, the next thing we want to mention is exactly, what nitrates have been used for decades in the treatment of cardiovascular disease. And if you've been paying attention to the news, you know that people with heart disease or cardiovascular disease, like heart failure or atherosclerosis or metabolic syndrome or hypertension, these are the people who have the highest risk for hospitalization and the highest risk for death. And so it's important to really take this seriously. There's an active discussion in the scientific and medical research communities about this enzyme called ACE2. Stands for angiotensin converting enzyme 2. In healthy individuals, this is the enzyme that your body uses to tighten up the blood vessels and increase blood pressure. For example, in a fight or flight response, if you need to get out of a bad situation, you need that blood pressure to spike so that you can be able to address the situation. But unfortunately, for a lot of people who have chronic heart conditions, that enzyme ACE2 can be seen in 2 times or 3 times the amount that you would see it in a normal person, in a healthy person. And the real worry with 2019 coronavirus is that it appears that the coronavirus uses this enzyme as a docking protein to infiltrate your cells and to start infecting your body. And so there's this active discussion, like, should hypertensive patients who are on drugs that can lead to an increase in ACE2 levels, should we be taking those off? And currently, all of the medical communities are saying it appears that the risk of taking people off of these medications is greater than the risk of adverse outcomes from COVID-19. So I do want to be clear that our current understanding now is people should maintain their heart medication regimen and be taking that faithfully. But it also begs the question, if there are other ways to promote heart health, then perhaps we should be focusing on those alternative means while we're at risk of catching the coronavirus, especially if it uses these specific proteins to gain access into your body. I'll say our understanding is limited, but I'm very much looking forward to the conversations and the research that's going to be coming out in the coming weeks. There are active clinical trials in this setting to really be able to figure out if that ACE2 enzyme is going to be something that we need to target. For now, using our best guesses with the available evidence, nitrates increase nitric oxide through a different mechanism. And so they don't seem to have the effect that other blood pressure drugs have on increasing ACE2, and they can safely help people manage their, at least some aspects of their heart condition. So I mentioned that nitric oxide from nitrates acts outside of these other systems. You can look at the slide if you're interested in knowing those systems. But another important thing to note is that this process isn't rate limited, or it doesn't necessarily have a mechanistic maximum. Your body's physiology, when you put more nitrates in there, it's going to produce more nitric oxide. Now that does have some safety implications. Don't go taking excessive doses of nitric oxide hoping that it's going to either prevent the coronavirus or help with the symptoms. Make sure that you're taking a sensibly dosed portion of them, but it is absolutely imperative to be exploring the different ways that we can promote heart health that don't affect that enzyme and have a lot of other side stream benefits that we've been talking about.
Absolutely. And I think I will take a moment and say the differences in between doses. Yes. So
Yeah.
one batch that we exactly tested, or a few batches by now, a dose of Resync has 4.35 natural nitrates, and you have to have a 4 at least grams or minimals per gram of nitrates to make any physiological change, and especially within your heart. Now, taking, we know from our research, more than 9 or 10 grams doesn't make it better than just taking anywhere between 6 to 8. That's what the research really shows. So it's super important what you said. More doesn't mean better, right? we've done a test where we had one product tested really 16.8 grams of nitrates, or minimals of nitrates per dose versus 4.3, and we were trying to understand what just happened and would that be better than the 4.35 grams, and it's actually not. It more again doesn't mean better, but we do know that 2 doses of Resync seem to be more powerful than 1. However, further research needs to be done on that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I think you may have misspoke. I believe it's 4 millimolar per gram.
Millimolar per gram.
Yeah. Mistake I make all the time.
Yes, millimolar. Huge difference. Yes.
Yeah, but just so that we're all the numbers you mentioned were absolutely spot on though. And this goes back to kind of like a framework for supplementing. When does one supplement? And I would argue there's a couple of different situations. One is your body deficient, or is there a condition that makes it so that you're not able to make enough of said supplement? And in which case there's a lot of people who are not making enough nitric oxide. And then the other setting would be, exactly what we're talking about now. Is this a normal physiological setting, or is this a special case where supplementing may help your body's your body's immune system is ramped up and your body's going through all of these changes that are not normal and demand a level of nutrition that is also not normal. And so I would argue that in a setting of infection, your body's not in a normal physiological setting, and it needs the support from things like nitric oxide and certain antioxidants and things like that to help it do its job most effectively.
Accurate, very much. And I also can share, we've done studies in Oxford, UK, when we see that our proprietary blend, exactly, if you just take the nitrates and you look at inflammation setting, and then you take the nitrates with our aronia berry, there's a huge difference between those two. The combination is actually more synergistic and powerful than just the nitrates from red spinach or beets alone. And also with what you said, Dietrich, I will allow very quickly the listeners to understand what really conditions or what daily activities can actually cause lower nitric oxide levels. Mm-hmm. Number 1, unfortunately, is being inactive, right? And something we cannot prevent, age. The older we are, and it seems very clearly from science that with an age of 40, it starts to drastically decrease, or decrease, I should say, drastically, maybe in a later age, but 40, it starts to decrease, especially in men more than in women. And we have a graph in our website to present clearly that image so people can visualize. Then also anti-acid and mouthwash, antiseptic mouthwash, those affect negatively nitric oxide levels. So be aware that if you are using either or, that you might be in a position exactly to take that supplement on top of nutritional valuable diet on a daily basis to support nitric oxide production in your body. Unfortunately, condition like cardiovascular health issues or diabetic patients, they are of course also predisposed most likely with a lower nitric oxide production in their body.
Yeah, agreed, 100%. It's very important to pay attention to these kinds of things. And let's point out, nitric oxide is not something that was discovered by physicians researching anatomy 150 years ago. This was something that was discovered and really made important in the scientific and medical community maybe 10 years ago or 20 years ago for those who are ahead of the curve. So you may not have heard about it, and your doctor might not be entirely aware of this, but we do include a lot of resources for just the regular person out there, as well as for health professionals on our website to gain a greater understanding of the implications that the nitric oxide system can have on every aspect of your health.
Absolutely. And let's just mention, because you said that it's a new subject, it's actually maybe not new, it's just maybe more paid attention to, because we are starting to see how valuable it is, because there were 3 fantastic professionals that got a Nobel Prize for exactly finding how nitric oxide affects the vascular health. However, based on their findings, there were other professionals who continued the research. As we just saying, research evolves, and really got to the point that it is connected to actually our even oral bacteria, and how oral bacteria and how oral health, Dietrich, is connected to your heart health. And that's more recent, right? So then physicians, cardiovascular doctors starts to now work on it to understand you may have a heart condition, and that might be all correlated to the, your gums health and how you treat your mouth, which is a gateway to our health, as we say, right? And how environment of your mouth should be more alkaline than acidic, because acidic really invites any pathogens and starts to affect nitric oxide levels as well. So there is a fantastic new research coming out on different potentials of nitric oxide being really useful in our overall health.
Yeah, Barbara, we're going to have to do another one of these recordings, because we could just break it down by every single system and talk about all of the beneficial effects. But back to coronavirus. Let's talk about the next one we have for you all. Oh, actually, let's just finish up with the heart function. There's a number of different ways that nitric oxide helps. It's not just by lowering blood pressure, although that's the most commonly known one. It can increase the flexibility of your blood veins. It can improve blood lipid panels. It can improve heart function after a heart attack, reduce inflammation that leads to atherosclerosis. Those are clogged arteries. These are just a snapshot of all of the research that shows how beneficial nitric oxide can be. So hopefully we can make these slides available to our listeners so that they can click on each of these links and go straight to the research article.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. I think that having that knowledge and having that really fact-based data to drive your decisions is going to be important to staying sane in these times of uncertainty.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. All right. So last thing, well, not the last thing, but when it comes to nitric oxide and the immune response, nitric oxide is, through a different pathway, a key piece of kind of the machinery that your immune system uses to kill pathogens. You've got these different white blood cells that recognize a foreign invader and take it down, essentially using a piece of this nitric oxide molecule cleaved off and made more reactive. So it's been shown in so many different types of infections that nitric oxide contributes to the production of the superoxide free radical, if you want to get technical. But there is actually specific research related to other coronaviruses that show that nitric oxide can be beneficial. I will point out that some of this research is in cells, some of it's in animals, some of it's in humans. So it's hard to be totally confident when we extrapolate these results to this new pandemic. Like I said, without the sufficient research, all we can do is make our best guess. So that's what we're doing right now. So studies in animals and cells, and I think the links are in the notes on this slide. Nitric oxide can directly suppress SARS coronavirus 1 from 2003 from replicating, and it can help your immune system mount an attack there. Sorry, this is my dog here. We're all inside quarantine, so he's enjoying the lecture with me.
She's very welcome to do it.
Awesome. So I just want to make sure that people know that there's so many beneficial effects that having sufficient nitric oxide for your immune system to be able to ramp up its defenses is going to be key for managing the symptoms and the effects of COVID-19. There's a lot of other nutrients, and so it's absolutely important to pay attention to what you're eating, how you're living, what, if any, supplements you might be using, but nitric oxide is definitely a key piece of the toolkit.
Thank you for mentioning.
Absolutely. All right, now there's, like we said, there's a lot of other ingredients in Resync, and these are all targeted to help regulate our inflammatory processes. So there's curcumin and turmeric, there's ginger, and sorry about that, we use the full plant extract, which provides a full spectrum of antioxidants from aronia and red spinach. And then instead of just using the nitrates from beet, Resync uses full beet powder. And so the benefit of this is that you're getting all of the benefits from the whole food, not just the isolated ingredient that might have been studied in a clinical trial. And what we know from this is that that having all of these different ingredients enhance the activity of nitric oxide, but they also help regulate the inflammation in your body. And that's going to be really crucial because one of the ways that coronavirus and any other infectious disease wreaks havoc on your body is by producing dysregulated inflammatory processes. And so having these full spectrum antioxidants and anti-inflammatories are going to be able to help the body regulate its increased capacity and its increased need for keeping control of the inflammatory processes.
Correct. And a valuable note to make here, we also have done independent studies that are unpublished yet on aronia berry potential also in increasing iron levels, which are usually, I want to say decreased during different times, depending what the body is going through, right? Knowing athletes who are going through a lot of, for example, physical exhaustion, there's actually higher level of female athletes that need the iron support than the male, but it's really needed in both. But let's keep in mind, we all are going through a physical exhaustion on a daily basis. And it's really important to treat the body kindly as we were a professional athlete, to provide the proper nutrition so our every system can really function in the perfect equilibrium or as close as possible.
Yeah, and you hit on that. That brings up for me the fact that, I may not have COVID-19 now, but I'm still cooped up in my house. I'm doing my best to eat well and to get outside when I can and exercise and keep a routine and stay mentally healthy. Everything we focused on in this presentation so far is focused on the potential use of the ingredients in Resync in alleviating issues caused by the coronavirus disease. But let's not forget that many of these ingredients are going to be helpful for many people just going about the kind of lifestyle that we're living right now.
Absolutely.
So to continue on, the other ingredients in Resync that might be beneficial here, curcumin from turmeric has been shown to not necessarily create nitric oxide, but kind of affect the background processes that help your body create nitric oxide. And so in healthy adults, as well as adults with metabolic diseases, curcumin and turmeric has been shown to be positive for heart health as well as for nitric oxide signaling function. Besides that, mango and mango extracts can provide circulation benefits at the microscopic level, and they can do this through a number of different mechanisms. We won't go into the details there, but it seems that the positive effects that mango can have on our cardiovascular system and our inflammatory processes may also play a role in making sure that the coronavirus infection in mild cases doesn't get out of hand.
Absolutely. And I think it's very important, Dietrich, to say that the oxygenation of the body is something we need to pay attention every day, because each one of us needs energy, and we want to spike our energy with stimulants. We want to generate and be able to generate naturally energy and sustain our body through early morning towards the night when we decided to go to sleep. So it's super important to keep in mind what ingredients, what combinations of them, what quantities of them can actually achieve that, right? And we've done probably more research on that than any other company that claims to make nitric oxide products.
Absolutely. And we also know that maintaining oxygenation at all the tissues is of critical importance for people who have any sort of infection that can lead to pneumonia. Pneumonia is just a filling of the lungs with fluid. It kind of coats where the oxygen goes into your blood and the carbon dioxide goes out, and pneumonia will help, well, it doesn't help anything. It prevents that process from happening. And most of the ingredients in Resync have been shown to participate in increasing the oxygenation of these kinds of tissues. So that's just the last note I wanted to make there. So on our last slide here, we've, I kind of had this hunch that, a lot of the people who are at highest risk for mortality from COVID-19 are also the people who have dysregulated cardiovascular systems and low nitric oxide levels. And so I've pulled this chart from a really wonderful resource, ourworldindata.org. They pull their information from the World Health Organization, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and various primary research articles. And they show here that cardiovascular disease is the leading cause of death for people who have coronavirus 2019. Or actually, let me clarify what I'm saying there. People who have a pre-existing cardiovascular condition are at highest risk of critical care, mechanical ventilation, and eventual death. So we want to make sure that people who have cardiovascular disease or diabetes or impaired lung function, hypertension, cancer, old age, or immunocompromised are paying attention to how they can support their health to maintain, to hopefully maintain resilience against such a nasty looking disease. And so I've included on the right the people who are also at risk for low nitric oxide levels. And obviously these are associations. We don't have the clinical trials, and I don't think we will ever have the clinical trials to show the direct link between these two things. But I do think that the animal studies and the other kinds of data that we can ascertain do point to dysregulated artery and vein function in the advancing negative outcomes of coronavirus. And so people, like we've mentioned, who are at low risk for or high risk for low nitric oxide levels, are people who have older age, who have heart disease, who have diabetes, who are sedentary, or who have obesity, people who are immunocompromised or have excess oxidative stress and chronic inflammation. And you see a lot of overlap between those people who are dying fastest from coronavirus and those who have marginal nitric oxide levels. One other thing to pay attention here is it's not like everybody in the US or everybody around the world has the coronavirus right now, and we're all just waiting for the symptoms to show up. With the various measures that have been implemented in the United States and across the world, we're not going to see this disease going away. The best models suggest, minimum of 6 months. In the best case scenario, 3 months, even though that might put excess strain on our healthcare systems. That's not a best case scenario. But some say we might be seeing coronavirus 2019 all the way into November of 2021. And it may just kind of, we may all get an immunity to it, and it could go into the pool of diseases that cause the common cold and the common flu. And so I'm not trying to worry anybody here. We do have measures that we can take to minimize the effects of this. But I do want to say, if you do have heart disease, or if you do have diabetes, or any other behavior-related chronic disease, it's not too late. This is the call to take control of the situations that you have the power to take control of. And I have a strong faith that Resync Recovery and the Resync collagen product can really help people with a lot of these chronic conditions get back into a healthy kind of lifestyle
that we are all going through.
Absolutely. And we're going to be having, our plan is to have a lot of useful content for people to take action on the kinds of things that we're talking about. And I'm really looking forward to being able to help guide people sensibly through this time of severe uncertainty?
It is scary, but like I said, I hope we will get out of this stronger, wiser, and healthier. I really hope so. And we have an opportunity. What do we want to do? Do we want to lock ourselves down and watch Netflix, drink, bottle or two per night of wine and have snacks? Or do we want to exactly maybe read valuable sources of research, maybe take the time to cook something, maybe take a time to do some movement with your kids, or teach them about how nutrition actually is impacting your body and why now it's the time to really address certain issues more than ever. I think it's always a great opportunity, but now it's just a time of bringing more clarity to our life, looking our own lifestyle, and really asking ourselves a question. Are we doing our best? Mm-hmm. And are we committed every day to take the right steps? So not only we take care of ourselves, but the person, next door to you. So with your actions, you are affecting your health and the person, and other people. And the same, the other person is affecting them and you. So we need to keep ourselves responsible right now and keep ourselves on the highest awareness level. What can you do to prevent yourself from getting this nasty virus? And what you are absolutely in a charge of is your own actions and decisions you make every day. Government, our president doesn't need to tell you what to eat, how to behave, and especially how to think during this challenging time. So positive attitude, believe that this will pass with the right steps that we as the society can only take. The government cannot do the job. They can just share the statistics to really emphasize how of a challenging situation this is. So some of us may take it more serious that we have been taking this disease from, because as I shared on previous videos, Dietrich and I don't want to take too much time on it. I've traveled to Europe recently. Yeah. Almost 2 weeks ago. And that's why I'm sitting at home to prevent potential any spread. But I know what mistakes were made and are still being made in Italy. Why Germany has the lowest rate of, death? Because they took the steps faster than any other country in Europe to address the medical needs. Now, will they be, looking at higher actually deaths soon? Yes, because the medical supply is decreasing just like everywhere else, but at least is the lowest everywhere because the right actions were taken when the time was right. And as you mentioned a few minutes ago, it's never too late.
Right.
Now is the time.
Right. And we're here to provide the resources for everybody watching to make the best decision for themselves.
Absolutely. Dietrich, what else would you like to say for everyone who's listening to us?
I just want to say that we should all keep a calm head about us. And if you're considering taking a supplement, to make sure that it is of a high quality and rigorously researched and, taken with the understanding of its limitations. At the end of this slideshow, I've included a summary of what we've talked about. The potential mechanism by which ingredients in Resync may help the body's defense against COVID-19, whether that's in prevention or in mitigating mild clinical symptoms. And I just want to, send my heart and my love out to everybody out there who's really suffering through this, and I think we can make it through it together.
Absolutely. I really appreciate your time, of course, your research, your efforts that you really put to make this presentation and be available to people today and to me. You're a very valuable team, part of our team. And I want to make sure that people also understand that we are here to support you live healthier life. That's our motto at Resync, always. Regardless if you decided to take our supplements or not, we are here to support you with the right information so you can make your own decision if the right ingredients, the right quantity and quality of them is something that you want to take. from Resync. And also, please keep in mind, it's always very important to note, supplement industry is not regulated by FDA. And that means that as much as we can do at Resync, and as a CEO of the company, I took every single precaution to make sure that our products are tested by third-party company, not just created in GMP certified facility. That's not good enough. Mm-hmm. It has to be NSF certified facility. And on top of that, even, it doesn't mean that your product cannot get contamination, which means every product that you consume, you want to make sure that it went through testing prior to being made and after it's being done, produced. And only few companies do that. NSF does it, and you have to go through specific testing after the production, which is called NSF Sport Certification, where you test it for banned substances and other contamination that could have taken exactly place, not purposely, but it just happens during a production time. BSCG, one of another companies we utilize for our products, and then is Informed Sport. Each one of those companies test for specific supplements. BSCG actually tests for the highest amount of banned substances, but all of the companies check that the products, the ingredients, that are on the label are inside of the product, and that the contaminants are with the right ranges that are allowed per serving, per tub, per container, and so forth. So you want to make sure that you just don't try to save money right now. We are not saying we are increasing our prices like companies have done it during this challenging time. And I think it's very disgusting. But
it's despicable. I can't even believe what I've seen from supplement companies and pharmaceutical companies.
Diabolical.
I mean, on the one hand, you have a number of companies who are extending their resources as much as they can to make sure that this world is able to get through a pandemic. And then on the other hand, you have the profiteers who just boil my blood. So
trust me, I am next to you or by your side when you just said that. We actually, on the other hand, actually give people discounts because I know how critical of a time it is for people. And on that note, when I said, try not to be stingy, but by going maybe to CVS and looking for something, you might be very surprised. I haven't found yet at this point in any CVS that I went through supplements that are actually tested by any of the companies that we've mentioned. And it's I would not take any of the supplements because as a creator of them, I understand what can happen and what goes on in production. So you should treat your body just like professional athletes and Olympic athletes do. And that's why they trust us, because we are very specific on the quantity, quality, the safety, and the results by the end of the day. And with that being said, again, nutrition, your diet comes first before any supplements. I want to make sure. I hope that the data we presented to you gives you an additional point of view of what could be valuable to you and the people in your life to consider consume on a regular basis to really just support your immune system moving forward.
Absolutely. 100% on the same page, Barbara. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
Thank you so much, Dietrich. Again, pleasure having you. I will allow myself just to say, if you guys have any particular questions when it comes to nitric oxide and what we have covered in this presentation, please write to us directly at info@resyncproducts.com. Please make a comment because this will be published on YouTube. It will be also a blog on our website where exactly all the links and the references, Dietrich, that you provided us with will be available as well. So make sure to go to Resync Products blog tab, click on it, and that will be the recent blog posted there. And you will actually see that there is many subjects we have covered when it comes to nitric oxide over the last few years. And the same about collagen and nitric oxide and what really products you could be paying attention to, what's valuable to ask yourself prior to spending any money on any products. Remember, we are here to support you, not to force you to buy our products. Mm-hmm. And again, you might be taking something that is working for you, and I'm the first one to congratulate you to being proactive and to pay attention to your health. So with that being said, remember, Resync is here to help you live healthier life, and we look forward to hearing from you based on what we covered today. Thank you so much for your time and attention, and please stay safe.